We do have a website, NELSIP.com. So there's lots of resources on there. All the events are on there. The survey, the most important thing at the moment is the survey, because we're trying to engage with employers. If you, your college, your business development team, anyone who has engagement with employers, if they can share that survey, that'll be very, very appreciated and welcomed. Okay, so the session hopefully will last, well, 53 minutes now. We've got a structure, 5 main questions we've kind of picked, which we want obviously your feedback and opinions on, and we'll leave 15 minutes at the end just to have AOB, any other related issues that you think are pertinent. And these discovery sessions really want to just deep dive, what approach are we taking and why, discuss experiences, challenges, successes, basically everything around T-levels. I know Anna is here for a discovery session herself, but from a commercial point of view, your opinions are very, very relevant and welcomed. So can I introduce, well, first of all, we'll do a round table and introduce each other, and then I'll hand over to Sean, and Sean will obviously introduce himself. So I'm going to pick Michael first. Oh, mute again, Michael.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Nick O'Reilly. I'm the head of department for health and childcare public service within Darlington College, and I've got some notes here from the head of engineering and the childcare reference them 5 questions.
Fantastic, thank you. Nice to meet you, Kevin.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Kevin Marston. I'm assistant principal at Gateshead College. And I've, as well as a bunch of departments that I oversee, I've had strategic lead for the implementation of T-levels, as Gateshead was an early adopter, and been working with T-levels pretty much straight after the Sainsbury report in 2016.
Wow.
Yeah,
okay.
I've got the scars to prove it.
Anna.
Morning. I am the partnership manager for Read in Partnership, which are delivering the Restart scheme. If you don't know what the Restart scheme is, I'm happy to have a conversation with you offline. I'm on this call as a bit of a discovery myself, as Mark said earlier, but I will contribute if I can, but I'm here to learn about the T-levels too.
I'll hand over to Sean for the majority of the session now, and Sean, if you want to just a brief introduction, that'd be great. Cheers.
Great. Well, firstly, I'm Sean. I'm supporting the NELSIP development in the North East. My background is in HR, so I was an HR director at Ford for 20 years and then worked for Rolls-Royce for 10 years before starting to support the NEAA actually about 6 years ago in various forms, and since then we've been active in the region on the skills agenda across automotive and more across higher education and further education as well. So firstly, I'd like to thank you for turning up today. This is our first session. We didn't think the numbers would be big, but we're hoping for a few more. So I appreciate you taking the time, and particularly taking the time to talk to your colleagues about the session as well. The intent of these sessions, they flow from a couple of sessions we had prior to Christmas, bigger sessions with providers, where we asked what is it that we need to be thinking about and talking about as part of a process in NELSIP. And the NELSIP process is as much a process as it is a report. And quite practically, if you look at the elements that the DfE have described in terms of the requirements, I would describe it really quite simply. It's about an employer-led approach, and I'm very aware of what that actually means. That having been an employer for a number of years, that's not quite as simple as it sounds, because employers often think they know what they want but don't actually know what they want, or don't know what they want. So there's a whole piece around how employees frame that demand signal. Then there's the supply piece, which is how those providers align to those needs, and then there's the bit in the middle, which is the interaction between the two, which is quite complex. So what we were trying to do in these sessions is understand some of those sort of tools that are around and emerging that will be used to try and match that demand and supply. Clearly, T-levels is something that's been introduced as a policy decision in the last few years, and they're at different levels of maturity in different sectors. So we're very interested as to your experiences on T-level, what you think about T-levels. The 5 questions are really open questions, and I will ask them in a very open way, because we are looking to understand what's worked, what hasn't worked, and just get your perception from different perspectives as well.
Sean,
so the first, yeah.
Can I just jump in quickly? Sorry, I've fallen foul. It's our first session. I didn't even introduce myself. So I'm Mark David. I'm the program manager for NELSIP. I work for North East Automotive Alliance, based in Durham, so local. So if anybody wants to discuss this further, more than happy to. And yeah, hand back to Sean. Sorry,
Super.
my fault.
Okay. So I guess the first question is a very open question. Experiences with T-levels, and from the introduction, I know some of you have got some experiences. Can we kick off with that discussion in terms of what's your experience so far?
I think from ourselves with childcare and engineering, it's been very, very positive. So from the learner's perspective and from the employer's perspective as well, certainly within childcare, they've been really impressed with the quality of the learners, and the learners have been they're really enjoying the program, and they're really enjoying the placement element of it. We spent some time before putting them into placement to really get them ready. And then we went through an interview process where we brought the employers in, gave them some cakes and tea and coffee and all of that, and then let them interview the T-level learners. And although some of the learners found that quite scary, they were supported through it, and they really enjoyed that process. And they're all in placement now. They all started placement in January. Engineering's had a few difficulties. They've had a difficulty where one of their learners didn't interview very well, and consequently, hasn't been selected by an employer. So they're still working on that at the moment, and obviously using the new change to the guidelines to try and support that individual.
And what kind of numbers were you talking about, Michael, in those two areas?
We've only got low numbers. Childcare's got 9 and engineering's got 10 at the minute.
Right. And you chose these 2 areas because they're specialities in the college?
Yeah, I mean, the childcare and healthcare, they lend themselves naturally to T-level because of historically learners at level 2 and level 3 always do placement. So then employer links are there, they're strong, and it's just a question of converting the employers into this is the different sort of a different delivery and a different model. Engineering was very difficult. We spent a long time trying to get employers, and luckily, because we've only got 10 in that area, we've got the right amount of employers for that. There is a big worry and a big concern. Certainly, one of my areas is science as well, and we're not running T-level yet, but at the moment, we're trying to place level 3 learners on work experience to try and clock up several hundred hours of placement, and we're not being able to do it. We just can't find. I know IT are in the same boat as well. So there is some big issues around the placement element. And also
when you say science, is that medical science?
It's going to be both. It's health and science as well. They're the 2 sort of pathways.
Yeah. Okay. And the types of employers that you've engaged on the 2 which have been successful, how would you describe that engagement process?
I think it's worked really, really well. We've got a small business development team with placement assessors that do the links. They've brought them in, they've met the tutors, they've met the learners. So we think that's very, very positive where it's worked.
And are they typically SMEs, or are they larger organisations?
They're SMEs.
SMEs, right.
Ask a question. Is the is the aim to progress onto an apprenticeship after the T-level?
No, with ours, it's to either go into university or go off into employment. I'm not quite sure about the engineering side. Certainly within the childcare, it's university to go into the teaching or the nursery nursing pathway. They're not interested in apprenticeships as far as we're aware.
So it's either or, T-level or apprenticeship. Is that the same with you at Gateshead College, Kevin?
In terms of afterwards, Is this what you're saying, Anna?
A
After you
choice
finish the
of,
program?
perhaps.
Yeah. So we've had I guess the luxury of being involved before the first 2020 T level was launched. So I've had numerous discussions with various partners all the way through this AOC, DFE, SFA, and so on, and the awarding organisations before they were granted awarding status for each of these, and help to try and model these. The intention, in answer to your question, Anna, is that because we've just seen, because we started in 2020, we've just seen our first T levels in early years and digital finish. So we're now on our next stage of first years, if you like. And actually, in terms of destinations, the majority of our digital learners went on to various HE pathways, majority in local universities, some going a little bit further south, Leeds, Beckett, and so on. One going into a higher apprenticeship, and one who's gone directly into employment from one of the placements that he was working at. A different picture with early years, very much like Michael. We've had some who have gone into specialist pathways, and as such have gone on to HE. So we've got some who are going into some who have gone on to teacher training, and see that that's a route. But we've also had a number that have gone directly into employment, more in this strand than we anticipated. We thought that quite a few would go on to HE, but the majority decided that they'd already found their niche, and that's where they wanted to stay. So, but really positive. We actually only lost one learner throughout the whole of our cohorts, and we had a significant number on early years.
And when you look, you're an early adopter and pre-adopter almost, and you cover most of the subjects as well, from what I can see. Is that correct? In terms of as they become available, because they've been released at different times, haven't they? How have you decided which ones you've done at different points?
Well, very much like Michael, in that when we first, obviously the first three T levels with the early years, digital and construction, there were 4 early adopters in the Northeast. It was ourselves, New College, Durham, Durham 6-4, and St Thomas More. And particularly the 2 colleges, ourselves and New College Durham, have worked really closely through the, as you call it, the pre-adoption process. In terms of trying to model it, the operational aspect of it, what does the program look like in terms of timetabling and so on? And we had, and I will say we had the luxury of having a fair bit of time prior to the first T level landing in 2020 to be able to model that as accurately as we could. We know some of the specs came very, very late. But in terms of early years, because there's like Michael's, like Darlington, there's a license to practice in there. So it meant that what we've got is an MVQ model that lent itself really, really nicely to T levels in relation to employer engagement. We got a really strong bank of existing employers that we were able to not go out and find new. We were able to use what we've currently got with the cohort size that we started. Very similar with digital.
Just before you move on, Kevin, on the care piece, one of the aspects that we've been talking to when we've talked to the various colleges, which has come out quite regularly, relating to apprenticeships as it relates to care, is at the level 2, and sometimes at the level 3 level, they're not preferred because the people move around quite a bit. And so the educational pathway is more suitable for that particular sector. Is that something that's relevant at T levels? It certainly came up at level 2 quite a bit. Is that as relevant at T level? Is it preferred to do a sort of educational program with some release as opposed to an apprenticeship?
I'm not seeing it's a difficult one to answer because we're strong in both our our E&T provision as we are in our apprenticeship provision in both of these sectors. I think there's supply and demand here as well.
Right.
In that like Darlington, we do a lot of work with IAG and making sure that we engage the learner with the right program. And many of these learners, particularly at the age they're entering this space, they are behaviourally they need developing.
Yeah.
And so the preferred option for most of those learners that will need those in what we call the employment edge up here, most of those learners who need those behavioural developments before they can go into a setting, the T-level route is the preferred route for obvious reasons, and vice versa for the apprenticeship route, where they are displaying behaviours or the academic level to be able to cope with the standard.
Okay. And so if I was a learner, just as a sort of experience, and I was coming to that level 3 qualification as a T-level or an apprenticeship, I've got a choice because they're both provided and they're both in front of me. Clearly, the maturity of my behaviour is one aspect of it. Is one considered to be academically more challenging at this stage?
No.
They're both the same. They've got the same kind of content.
Yeah.
The equivalency, obviously, in terms of qualifications, but that's not so much of a consideration. It's more about preference and my sort of maturity to the workplace at this point.
Yeah, it's one aspect of it. It's not the only aspect of it, but yes, it's one aspect of it. We've always had a really large cohort. Early years and health is a really really large curriculum area at the college. So we've always had opportunities for learners who start on a study program to flip onto an apprenticeship as they come available.
Right.
Again, I think there is a supply and demand argument here with apprenticeships. They're not always readily available, and particularly not always readily available within a geographical location where learners are able to get to those settings. So it's one of the challenges, I guess, we'll come to when we get to that item. But certainly with digital, it's very similar. We started with digital primarily because for us it was very much low-hanging fruit. We were able to all of our digital programs are modelled around employer needs. We deliver software programs within the current study program that is modelled to meet our local employer need. We're fortunate we're in the middle of a tech zone.
Yeah.
Where the college is positioned, we're directly opposite Proto, which is one of the leading immersive hubs in Europe.
Yeah.
We've got tech giants around the area, but we've also got micro and SMEs in around the area as well. So again, we've always had a really good relationship and a bank of employers who help us model our program. So T-levels was a natural one for us. And I remember very early on, before T-levels landed in 2020, a lot of colleges were moving away from those early adopters. Were moving away from digital because digital was quite a hard one to deal with if you hadn't already got a well-embedded program within the college. But for us, it lent itself.
Yeah.
However, we didn't go with construction because construction wasn't.
Just before you move on to construction, just on digital, the way you describe it, and I guess when we look at the apprentice standards, it's similar. For digital professionals, so these people who are, it's not just digital awareness, it's those that are going to have a career in digital. Three looks to be the base level. And what you're describing is a vocational pathway, because I think you said earlier that most of them went on to higher education as well. So there's an alternative route into the degree system all the way through, because they progress from being a software analyst to a programmer to a whatever, all the way through the system. Is that how you see it, as a sort of a route into that career path, and a sort of quite a sort of I guess a sort of established career pathway in as well? It seems to be quite normal for kids to think of that way as a way into digital.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's a well-established progression route, isn't it, within digital, whether they want to go into big cyber or they want to go into big data or they want to go into whatever. I'm not from that background. I'm an engineering background. So it's well established. We've got a really good history of progression into, because we've got some great universities around the region. So most of our learners on general study program, level 3 study program, at the end of their year 2 progress on to higher education before they then go into employment. And we've seen a very, very similar pattern with our first cohort of T levels.
Right. And overall, sorry, I interrupted you in terms of construction, but overall, what kind of numbers are you talking about? You said you've got quite large numbers. What kind of numbers have you got going for the T level?
It was interesting because when we first became involved with T levels, and I know, speaking for New College Durham, that they were the same, is that because we had a really healthy digital and games program running at the college, we were looking to flip the majority of our learners. And so when I had to put our planned starts over to the SFA prior to 2020, I was at the time looking at 50 or 60 starts. But this was quite naive because we didn't have all of the information. We didn't have all of the spec. It was really a work in progress at that time. So what we decided to do as a college, and I know this was exactly the same strategy for the other colleges around the region as well, is that we decided to go with single cohorts.
Right.
Because this at the time was very much uncharted territory for us and other providers. This was completely new qualification to the landscape, and therefore what we didn't want to do is to test this program as much as we knew what we felt was the right thing to do. We didn't want to test this program because we don't, as a college, we don't deliver any 2-year programs. We still deliver 1+1 programs, and I think most that have been like me in this sector for a very long time have moved away from those 2-year programs for very obvious reasons. So even our A levels are still AS and then A level. So we decided to go single cohort. What we have done, with just coming back to early years, because of the success of our earlier program, we've moved all of our level 3 study program over to T levels now. So in terms of numbers, this year I started with around 40. And across the college, we've got in the region of about 180 currently going through T levels.
No, that's helpful. Thank you. Sorry, I interrupted you on the construction.
No, it's okay. Construction was the other one, which is the one of the 3 of the early adopters. We decided not to go with construction in the first round. New College Durham, I know, went with it because they delivered all 3. The reason for that is that we didn't have a really well-established level 3 program currently. And so we decided that it was worth pausing that one. And actually, we've started with that one this current year, and of which we've got a single cohort, but we've only gone down the surveying route. We haven't gone down the on-site, and that primarily because of recruitment, for no other reason.
And how would you sort of compare the construction T-level process with the other 2 that we've just described? How would you compare the experiences at a sort of a sector level? Is there any differences? In
terms of employer engagement, or
in terms of you know, is it harder? Is it the same? You know, because when you look at the construction sector, it's a very different sector, and historically it's been, you know, you've had the skilled trades, and then you've had the lower levels, and then you've had the professionals, the architects, the surveyors. And I'm just wondering whether it feels different in terms of trying to establish a T level in the construction sector versus, say, a digital or a healthcare.
I wouldn't say it's any more difficult. Again, we've got great links with various sizes of business around the region, from Balfours through to smaller independents. And you know, we've got strong links with, I think you were at CITB, Mark, weren't you? We've got strong links with CITB through the college as well. So again, we've got a well-established reputation and network. I guess we'll come on to this, but I guess it's more about awareness of what a T level is than it is anything. And I remember working with very, very young when we were scoping out T levels, working with S Group, and I think that the challenge, particularly from an employer point of view, is what do I get out of a T level that I wouldn't get out of an apprentice? And that's a real challenge, particularly for the construction industry. And I don't know whether that was your experience with CITB, Mark, but certainly the conversations we've had is around that investment, I guess, from an employer point of view. It's the investment. They have a clear understanding of what the investment is if I'm an employer in a construction industry and I invest in an apprentice. It's very, very clear. What's my investment and what's my reward if I take on a T level learner? And it was put very, very simply to is it Damon at S Group? He put it very, very simply to say the apprentice is mine and the T level learner is yours. And therefore, at the end of it, I still have that apprentice who then becomes my employee and continues to be my employee, whereas this T level learner potentially isn't. So I think it's more, and I think that was the only challenge I've had really in terms of the differences between an apprentice and a T level in terms of an employer view. I've not had that challenge anywhere else. I've not had that feedback from any of the other routes, and we've got a number of routes running now. But I've not had that. But I think the construction, as you said, construction is very different, isn't it, in terms of its outlook? Yeah, no, that's really helpful. Should we move on to the engaging employees bit? Thank you for the background, and I know we've touched on a number of the other questions as we've gone through that. Michael, you talked about engagement of SMEs and your business outreach. How does that relate? You know, when we look at business outreach in some of the colleges, it's obviously becoming more and more important. And when you talk about employer-led, those relationships are quite important. Can you describe to us what that involves?
Well, certainly within the childcare, like Kevin already mentioned, it's already been established. It's been established for years. So it was just a question of our assessor teams contacting the known employers, inviting them in, and laying on a bit of a spread presentation, meet some of the learners. So that was just normal.
And what are the characteristics of those employers? Are they larger companies that operate multiple centres, or are they SMEs, or are they a network group? How SMEs?
Yeah, they're SMEs, and there is networking groups within the local community with the schools and the nurseries, and they were pretty much all on board. We've been drip feeding about T levels since they've come out. Although we're one of the late sort of starters onto it, we've been drip feeding it through school liaison. We've had school liaison staff coming into college, doing little presentations with the deputy principal and stuff. That's been going.
What's the compelling offer to them then? Is it this you're getting somebody who's qualified, has got a license to operate, good quality person, and that's the deal to the person going through that is at the end of this you will be qualified to go and work in one of these jobs, and you'll be able to take your pick, kind of thing. Is that what's the proposition?
It is that, and the chance for the school or the nursery to actually mould that learner into their processes, their procedures, and because we get it every year, we get learners that go on to placement that are not T level, and the employers love them and they just snap them up and say, here you go, we're going to give you a job, you're fantastic. And then we get others that are not so fantastic that they get the pat on the back and sort of, well done, thank you very much, off you go. And each year we get a report back. We get feedback from the employers on each individual learner, so we can discuss it and sort of learn lessons. So I think with the employers on the T levels is they're all singing the praises of the small cohort and the learners that they've got, because they've engaged really, really well, and they're sort of following the instructions. They're being proactive. So it's worked really, really well at the moment. I think moving forward, where we're going to get bigger and bigger cohorts, and bearing in mind, this is the 2 years now, where normally, like Kevin mentioned, we normally run 1 year courses. So normally we would just have a learner in a placement for a year, they would go off, and then that placement would be free. Now we're going to come to the problem as time goes on and more learners do T level, potentially we're going to run out of placements. And that's not been, that needs to be taken into the equation as well. Certainly as our cohorts get bigger, next year we'll have a year 1 and a year 2. They're being kept for 2 years rather than 1 year. Eventually, if it grows and grows, we will potentially that'll be an issue that we'll need to look at and address.
Yeah, thank you. Okay. Kevin?
Yeah, this is exactly what Michael said. It's I think particularly for early years, the settings are generally small independents, and they see that this is a great recruitment opportunity for them as well. And it's a horrible phrase, but it is that try before you buy opportunity for them as well, which is why so many of ours have got really great positive destinations. The challenge for us educationally is, as Michael will know, is that we as part of the program, they have to study 3 age ranges, and that can be a challenge for us.
Right.
But the settings themselves are generally small independents. So because they're small independents, the advantage is that the learners get a tighter and a closer relationship with the entire workforce there. We hoped very early on that we would attract larger employers, but I think the larger employers, particularly those levy paying employers, generally look to spend their levy, and this accepting a T level on a whether it's the full 315 hours or half of it, is a commitment. It's a hell of a commitment for them, particularly when they've got a levy pot that's not been spent. And in fact, there's one of the things when we first started all of the discussions, and I don't know which Secretary of State was in place, and it may have been Damien Hines at the time, but it was all, we were saying, well, can we not look at levy to be used in this space as well? It makes perfect sense. But we are where we are. I think with digital, it's very similar as well. And Michael's point is one that's just, I said at the beginning, I've got the scars to prove this, and one of the scars is about saturation, and it is about, we have a number of providers who it's increasing year on year as we move through the years, and the funding switch off, which was delayed for 1 year, has now obviously been announced with the QCF programs, and the first funding switch off for the what they're calling the wave 1 and wave 2, which is all of the first 3 and the health science and science, that will switch off 24-25, or plan to switch off 24-25. So it will drive providers into this space. The thing that echoes and has been echoing for many years now is about placements and opportunities for placements, and how many employers do we have to how many learners by number of providers that will be hitting this space very quickly. I chair the Northeast LEP provider group, of which there are the majority of the providers, both sixth form and FE colleges, within sort of we don't go as far south as Darlington, but we pick up pretty much most providers a bit north of that. And I've been working with obviously national groups, AOC and so on, with other providers that are coming into this space to get them ready. And every meeting we go to, this is exactly what's raised, because we all work with some fantastic employers, and we couldn't do this without those employers. And what we don't want to do as providers is, I'm aware I'm being recorded, upset them by everybody knocking on the door and saying, will you take an apprentice, will you take, so there is a consideration, and there has been some flexibilities that were implemented as part of the pandemic, and those flexibilities have now been confirmed as permanent flexibilities. It's still to iron out and flesh out the detail in that, but that's really welcome. And I was on a call yesterday with the ESFA, just trying to understand a little bit more about what those flexibilities mean in practice.
What are hybrid learning? And
it's one of the hybrid learning. One of them is if you are considered as a SEND learner. My definition, because I've got a background with Heine's funding as well, I introduced a program here at the college called Project Choice years ago, which is about employability for And the definition to me is of a SEND learner is a learner who's in receipt of an active EHCP. Well, that's not defined within the flexibility. So I think there's still things that have been fleshed out, but absolutely, welcome the fact that they have considered these flexibilities as a permanency and not just as a reaction to the pandemic. And I think the pandemic obviously kicked us and hit us hard in terms of placements, and particularly around the digital sector. And one of the great things now is that because obviously digital lends itself to people like me working from home today. But obviously the directive at the time was two placements in person. But now there's a relaxation on that, which is great.
Right. And just in terms of that sort of, obviously it's early days, but you've had some cohorts go through. What's the sort of reputation of T-levels amongst the learners coming in, and I guess the parent group is quite influential in that process? There was always a concern and there's always been a concern around how it would be positioned relative to traditional A-levels. And I guess the way the discussion's gone, it's almost the comparator's been as an alternative to an apprenticeship. I'm interested as to where it sits. If I almost put T-levels in the middle of A-levels and an apprenticeship, how is it positioned, do you think, as it started to roll out?
Do you want me to go first?
Yeah.
Okay. There is no doubt that there is a massive lack of awareness around T-levels that still exists and has been the case for a good few years. There's no doubt about that in terms of people's awareness of what a T-level is and where it sits in terms of parity with A-levels and apprenticeships. There is still a lack of understanding, and some of that I put our own door. Some of that I think we as providers need to be better in terms of how we promote prior to any learner thinking about coming into college in one of the open events and then signing up for a course. And we as a college at Gateshead, we're doing a lot about that. There's lots of government initiatives that we all hear on the radio and have seen on the TV and so on. I think one of my biggest concerns, and I don't know whether Michael will agree in his area, but one of my biggest concerns is IAG and careers advice at schools. Baker Clause didn't work. And now there is legislation that's just come out to say that no, you will engage with other providers outside if you are a sixth form or a non-sixth form. That there needs to be better advice and guidance, and part of that needs to include T-levels as an option, so that the youngsters at year 11 are getting a more rounded choice. And it isn't about stealing learners. It isn't about taking learners who should be on that sixth form program into a provider, into a college. It's about making sure that those learners have a really clear understanding of all of the options. And what we've done over the last few years is we run careers guidance events, and these are not recruitment events. These are we run them twice a year, where we invite everybody who has a vested interest in post-16 education to come and say, what's an A-level, what's an MVQ, what's an apprenticeship, what's a T-level, and who's it suited to, and where can it go, what's its destination, how many UCAS points, etc., etc. And this is just an awareness event where people can say, oh, now I understand what that is. Because unfortunately, I think there is massive inconsistency in terms of that level of knowledge and good, what I would call good careers advice that exists, certainly in pre-16.
Right, that's really helpful. Thank you, Ken. Michael?
Yeah, I think it's very, very similar, and the sort of T-levels pitched really as a hybrid between an A-level and an apprenticeship. So it's the sort of, we're selling it as the best of both worlds. So there's elements that you graded like an A-level with your A-star. There's elements graded like a vocational with your pass merit distinctions. And then there's also that big chunk of vocational placement. And, and we're just hoping it's going to grow, and we're going to get the numbers from that. You'll always get your hardcore sort of schools that say, oh no, there's bright lad off to the sixth form to do your A-levels, and then there'll be others. It's about, like Kevin mentioned, it's about educating the schools liaisons and the school staff to say this is the the new model, and it's there for the taking, really, for the young bright learners.
And do you think if I was a learner and I decided to go for T levels, or could have gone for A levels, could have gone either route, when I finished my course and attained, say, a comparable level, will the universities look at me in the same way? Will the local university look at me in the same way? Or
We're hoping, yeah. I mean, we like I say, this is our first year with delivering the T level, so we're hoping that yes, they'll look at that. There's the evidence that equates to this amount of UCAS points. Yes, you can progress on, and we've not heard anything negative to say that universities are not accepting it. Yeah,
because I guess that's an important aspect in terms of parity, isn't it? How it's considered as an alternative route. And I guess
it's comparable then between all three A levels and T levels and
yes.
So it's comparable in the system, and I guess theoretically, if I went through that route, I should have just as much success in my application process within the university system within the UK as I would whichever route I took. And I guess that goes back to this sort of question, which is, as a learner, that influences. It goes back to your sort of influencing process in terms of those multiple pathways. Okay, I'm conscious of the time. We've got 13 minutes left up. I guess lessons learned. If you were doing it again, what would you do the same, and what would you do differently?
I think for us, our engineering have mentioned more robust interview process to prepare the learners better. I think that was one of their lessons learned. And then
that's to prepare the learners when they were interviewed by potential employers for work experience. Yeah.
And then the childcare have said none so far, continuing exactly the same. It's working well, so that was very positive.
It sounds on the childcare. I mean, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it sounds as though the sector, the requirement, the qualification is pitched. It's almost a sweet spot from where you were. It's allowed you to provide that sort of license to operate in a vocational qualification, which suits both the learner and the employer.
It does, yeah. It does, yeah. I think I agree with that. I think for us moving forward with the defunding of the level 3 teaching assistant and the level 3 early years workforce for young people, then we're going to get to a stage at the end of next year where learners that want to get a level 3 qualification to get straight into work, there'll be no option. There'll be nothing. You'll have to say you do the T level or you go do another career pathway, and that's going to be quite challenging. Very, very challenging, because we're going to get some young learners that think, look, I don't want to do this academic sort of semi-academic route where you can get UCAS points and go to university. We've got hardship at home. Mum and dad just want me to do a course so I can get into work and earn some money, and there won't be a route for them because the other courses will be defunded, and that'll be a shame. That's going to cause further issues down the line, I think. And that's something we've got to deal with when we're talking to the schools and talking to the young people that are coming through that want child and education as a career path, and that's going to be mirrored across the sector, I fear.
Right. Thank you, Kevin.
The challenge is a very similar challenge, obviously, and it's going to be a challenge for all providers in this space, about level 2 progression to a T level. I've just done a piece of work because obviously now we're at year 3 for us in this, and I've got a little bit of trend that I can look at now, and particularly our level 2 progression to either a BTEC or equivalent compared to our progression to a T level. Although, the caveat is we're still very early in the whole T level space. The sway is most definitely towards the existing level 3 BTEC route. And some of that is about behaviours, and I come back to. Some of that is about learners who are at level 2 And actually, if you in answer to Anna's question, as Michael said, you know, it's equivalent to 3 A levels. And the anticipation is, I always pitched T level at 3.5. The not a level 3. I always pitched it at 3.5. It's sort of occupied a bit of a space between that and HE, because of the academic rigor within it, but also the fact that you know, traditionally our programs, unless we've moved over to RQF, which we did in digital, are portfolio based and assignment based. This obviously that now brings back into exams and you know, traditional testing and employer set projects and so on. And for some learners, this isn't right for them where they are currently in their education. So the safe space was the traditional level 3 and not the T level. So the majority at the moment of our learners have progressed from an existing level 2 onto a existing level 3. Where we've recruited to our T levels is those that are more academically able at level 2. In other words, they've got the required maths and English, because when we scoped the content of and the delivery content of T levels, you know, it's a packed program, particularly early years with the 715 hours license to practice. You can't throw in a maths and English GCSE in there. And given the fact that T levels, in terms of the way that you map your timetable over the 2 years, it has to be very fluid, whereas as everybody knows, a GCSE is a very linear program. It's tested at a certain point, and you know, it doesn't lend itself. But we just thought we would blow people's heads if we did a T level and a maths and English. So we had a very I won't say strict, but we had a rigorous recruitment at a certain academic level, because the anticipation, if it's engineering, and I don't know where you set yours, Michael, but we set ours at level 5 maths.
Level 5 for engineering.
And because because it's engineering, and also the fact that a lot of these learners will go on to, or anticipated going on to university and do BEngs and so on. The biggest concern we have at the moment is those that are progressing, because we do have healthy cohorts, but the majority of those are coming with good GCSEs from school. So
with your sort of broader sort of roles that you talked about before, I guess when I look across the North East generally relative to the rest of the UK, the attainment levels at level 4 GCSE are broadly comparable. Not 4, sorry, I'm on the other way around, aren't I? At level GCSE level are broadly comparable with the rest of the UK. At level 3, the progression is slightly lower than the rest of the UK at a regional level. And what you're describing says that could have an adverse impact at a regional level if those qualifications and the level of qualification requirement in terms of foundation skills, in terms of progression. Am I making a jump there? Is there a danger that there won't be as many kids progress to level 3 because of the requirements in T levels?
Yes, I think definitely. Certainly in Darlington, where the actual attainment rate of GCSE from schools is lower, it's lower than the region and lower than the northeast. Then we can definitely see that. And if the funding gets pulled for the other level 3 provision, that there won't be, the learners won't physically be able to get onto the course. Because we're creating extra level 2 courses, so learners can come onto a level 2 transition course, and if they still haven't got their maths and English, they can move over for another year onto a different level 2 to try and develop them again. And then if they still haven't got it, they've missed the boat. They can't get onto that T level because they're not academically at level 4.
Because I think that level 2 debate is an important debate, because when we had the discussion previously in terms of the sort of the distinction between hard to fill jobs and scarce skills, which are hard to fill, the scarce skills tend to cut in at level 3 and above, but the level 2 jobs, a lot of jobs are requiring basic foundation in maths and English and digital. as a requirement. And as you look across some of the sectors which we've selected in the LSIP, particularly around advanced manufacturing and digital for digital careers rather than digital for awareness in all careers, that bar seems to be rising. So the emphasis on that attainment level at level 2 is going to go there quite quickly, isn't it? As you suggest, because if that's a requirement to be able to progress to level 3, it's going to push quite a bit of pressure down the system as well to make sure that those level 2 attainment levels enable that. Is that understood, do you think? I mean, the way you described it is a very clear explanation. Did you think that's understood, the potential impact? Sorry, Kevin,
I think it's understood within the sector, within FE,
but not more broadly.
I don't think it's understood wider. Yeah, and that's for the principals to be lobbying and pushing, and I think it is something that DFE need to be made more aware of the impact of the decisions of the defunding. And I'm sure it's going on. I'm convinced it's going on. But I know it is. Yeah.
Okay. No, that's really helpful. I think it is an important aspect in the LSIP, because I think when we look at the balance between those scarce skill jobs, which are smaller in numbers, and the actual hard to fill jobs at level 2, typically, which are large numbers in all the sectors, whether it's a care worker at level 2 or whether it's an operator at level 2 in a factory, you can't ignore both. You almost have to deal with both. You have to walk and chew gum. You can't just sort of say we're going to focus on that one or that one. And clearly the emphasis in the LSIP is technical skills, which implies a higher level of attainment. So it does imply the sort of at least 2, but more likely 3 and above, which are the smaller numbers. But that level 2, we can't ignore that, because when we talk to colleges, it's actually the bedrock of their business plan. But it's also a requirement. That's where they get the most requirement from the employers, talking to them about making sure they've got work ready people at level 2 with the base qualifications. Yeah. But it's interesting, that link to T levels. That's really helpful. Thank you. Okay, I'm conscious of the time. We've got 3 minutes. Is there anything that we should have asked which we haven't asked, or anything that we should have talked about that you've got on your lists or your bits of paper in front of you which you think we should be at least aware of?
If I could just ask a very quick question. So earlier on, Kevin, you said that there was a massive lack of awareness of what a T level is in comparison to A levels and apprenticeships, and that you're holding awareness sessions. Is there have you got any anything you could share with me that kind of like a simple document that says what one is against the other, the pros and the cons? Or is that something that could be developed that could simplify the awareness of what they all mean to a learner?
So do you mean, Anna, in terms of if I'm a learner, should I follow an A level or should I follow? No, it's only information really. There are lots of information on the T level Gov websites, right, lots of them. Okay. But there's also information on if you go into providers' websites and look on the websites, most providers, because sometimes that's the first place that particularly parents, etc., would look, is to go onto a website.
Parents that might need it given to them on a plate, that wouldn't go off and search, sort of those that don't have the best role models at home, perhaps, or those that.
Yeah, absolutely. Like Michael Darlington, we at Gateshead, we draw from 3 of the most deprived wards in the country, and we have learners with horrendous backgrounds, and for the reasons that you've just said, wouldn't have the ability and the opportunity to be able to research and search in that way. So what we produce at those events, and we're just revamping our website at the moment to include a more simplified. Yeah. Why should I do one opposed to the other? And exactly. Which one would suit me? Yeah. And I think that's really, and what we are promoting more, and it just comes back to your point then, Sean, is this is an employer-led program, and the whole point of this was to bridge the skills gap in comparison to our neighbours across Europe and Scandinavia. And that was the whole point of T levels. It was because we were, as a country, woefully lacking in our vocational skills. So what we're doing is we have employers, and we've got a great network of particularly around manufacturing and engineering employers in the region, and so we involve employers in those discussions. So what would I, as an employer in a manufacturing business, want out of a T-level learner, and what would I want as an employer out of an apprenticeship? And actually, they're very similar, very similar. I want somebody with a good work ethic. I want somebody that can turn in on time. I want somebody that's dependable. I want somebody that I can train, and that's what they want. So a lot of what we have asked for, just coming back to your point, Sean, is if you take digital, we all had to work really hard post-pandemic to say a lot of our settings are independent micro businesses with 1 or 2 or 3 employees at most, and most of them didn't return to the setting after the pandemic. So why can't we have flexibility in terms of virtual learning? And now, fortunately, that's come through, but it was hard work. It was hard work to get that, because that's what our employers were asking for. Vendor qualifications is another. So we have a number of small independents that all operate in the same space as an intellectual property there as well, but they all use different platforms. So what we asked for was funding vendor qualifications. Unfortunately, we're not there yet. So I think what we try and do is we try and reverse engineer this. We try and say, from an employer point of view, this is what I want, because as parents, we all want our children to get jobs eventually, no matter what pathway they take, whether it's a short pathway and finish at level 2 and go into a garage and operate as a mechanic, because generally that's what's accepted around the motor vehicle sector, or they come out with a level 6 or a level 7, wherever they go in engineering. The progression and the aim is the same, isn't it? Everybody gets a job. So that's where we come from it, from an employer point of view. So why would I do a T-level in engineering opposed to an apprenticeship in engineering? Why would I be a healthcare professional, therefore finish at level 3 or go on and study in adult nursing? From an employer perspective, because that's what parents want to hear. They don't want to hear me and Michael, because they're going to get me and Michael saying the same thing every year from an educational point of view, because that's what we do. They want an employer saying, this is what I need, because that's the important thing.
Great. Well, let's finish there. I'm conscious of the time. Thank you very much for your participation, Michael, Kevin and Anna. It's a small, perfectly formed group this morning, but the amount of information you've given and shared is fantastic. So thank you very much for that. And we're running other sessions which you may interest you as well. We set 3 up. We're going to have another 3 after that, but we're just holding off on terms of what we'll talk about in those 3 sessions, depending on the feedback we get. And if there's anything else you want to share with us, or any comments at any stage, Mark's emails on the website, and we're collecting information. We're analysing it. We're working through, and we'll start to sort of feedback as well in terms of some of the themes we're seeing as well.
Thank you very much. All the events are on the website, guys. Your input is vital to this LSIP process. So please, if you can spare, send survey out, attend all the events, and get in touch with me if you've got any questions. But appreciate your time this morning, and we'll catch up soon.
Have a good day. Thank you. Now,
no problem. Mark, I'm happy to help in any way. So just give us a drop us a line, and if you need us to support some other events, I will do.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
No bother. Cheers. Have a good day.
Bye.
Bye.